We've put 4 Batman movies into the Pantheon already, so what about a 5th? It's time for us to take vengeance on all of the shitty DC movies that have come out this decade and talk about The Batman.
Let's play a game.
What's black and blue and dead all over?
If you are justice, please do not lie.
I'm here to unmask the truth about this city. You're part of this too. How am I part of this? You'll see.
If this continues, it won't be long before you've nothing left.
Who are you under there?
What is the price for your blind eye?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Superhero Pantheon. On this podcast, we take one movie and determine whether it belongs in the Pantheon pile of shame or somewhere in between. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps through the real world. Please leave a 4 or 5 star review so as to help people discover this show. My co-host for this week and every week will be Brian DeBrain. He can be found on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. Brian, our timing continues to be impeccable because here we are in the month of October and we are reviewing a Batman movie that is based off of The Long Halloween. It is also very fitting because Kevin Ford and I just recently reviewed Mindhunter, which was directed by David Fincher, and this movie very clearly taking a lot of influence from the 1995 film Seven. And really, if you look at The Dark Knight and you look at this movie, 1995 has very much informed our two recent Batman movies because you've got Heat and The Dark Knight, of course, and Seven in this movie. Let's just say, unless they were taking Kiss from a Rose, I'm really glad that we're not being influenced by Batman Forever. Brian, this movie came out just over a year ago, about 18 months ago at this point. And I have to say, this is a movie that it made $770 million. I feel like it was extremely successful at the box office. The critics' reviews are very good. But Brian, for some reason, and I think this has a lot to do with DC in general. And again, I think the fact that this movie did not capture people's imaginations is another sign of kind of superhero movies losing their influence. But I have to say, after rewatching this movie, and I was thinking, how is this going to play 3 hours of Batman? And it's very, very dark. I gotta say, Brian, I was very impressed watching the second time around. I think it really holds up well. I think there's a lot of good performances. I think there's a lot of good work being done in front of and behind the camera. Matt Reeves does it again, in my view. I mean, we talked about the Planet of the Apes trilogy. He had a hand in the 2 subsequent movies, and I think he did a tremendous job. Rise of the Planet of the Apes was good. But then you look at Dawn and War, and those movies are just top shelf in terms of both apes movies and sci-fi genre pictures from the 20th century. So for my money, Matt Reeves, absolutely the right pick to shepherd in a new Batman. And I think this movie is really, really good. That's my hot take.
See, when this first came out, I wasn't so high on it. I don't know what it was. I watched it twice in theaters. Maybe it was just at the time, I don't know, because my job at the time was kind of wearing on my body a little bit. I was kind of getting a little tired in the theater. 3 hours is a lot. But, watching it at home, it's a completely different experience. You get to, watch it and, at your own pace. I ended up watching it in, 2-3 nights. But still, I was just kind of at my own pace. And each hour gets more and more engrossing. I think this script is incredible. I didn't realize how good it was the first or second time around, but once you dig deep, there's a lot of meat to the bone on this script because it's not just about, you know, good and evil, Cape Crusader fighting off villains and stuff like that. There's like a deeper message in this, and it all kind of relates to this idea of rich white elitism. You know what I mean? And even Catwoman talks about it. She literally says that we got to get rid of these rich white assholes that are ruining the city. And when you break it down, like it's really that's what it is. The people that are really corrupting the city are the rich white elite assholes. And Batman doesn't realize he's part of the problem. And I think that's what I missed the first time around is that he is kind of part of the problem. And now that he is going to switch from vengeance to like hope, and that's kind of the message of this movie, that transition, I think he's going to become even more of the Batman that we know, and embrace that idea of giving people hope and doing something for the city as opposed to getting vengeance for something that he will never be settled with the death of his parents. So I think there's some deeper meanings in this movie, and it kind of like, especially like when I was just sitting down, and of course when I watch it home, I watch it with the closed captioning. There's a lot more detail in the script and a lot more. There was a lot more to the relationship with Alfred that I didn't realize, right off the bat. And I never realized that this relationship is not based less on, like a servant master kind of relationship, very much so like the traditional Alfred Batman relationship, but this is more of a father son. And I think that's what really makes that scene in the hospital bed so emotional, is because once you establish that connection, yeah, I think, this version of Alfred is not, I mean, he's not exactly tech savvy. He's not exactly like totally the smartest person, but I mean, he's there to be a father. And I think that's a big difference and a big change. He's not always going to be there to like criticize Bruce for all these little things like all the different Alfreds have done, but I like him being the father figure, and that's a big change of pace. And I like the fact that Batman's making mistakes and he's learning from his mistakes. And I think that's what's going to be key, leading him to being the world's greatest detective. And in this case, even Penguin makes fun of him, like, look at you two as the world's greatest detectives, not knowing Spanish, Ellen Law. So I thought that was a good little thing. Again, that's kind of his white privilege kind of peeking out. But we can talk about that scene later on. But that's definitely his white privilege, because he's assuming that Alfred, who's this English butler, just correctly translates Spanish without correcting or checking if he was right or not. Yeah, that's a little bit of white privilege.
Absolutely. I think there are a lot of strong aspects to this movie thematically, in terms of not just what you're talking about, but also in the end, Paul Dano's Riddler is very much an incel, and the group that he has following him are a group of incels. And I think that this movie correctly points out that the issue isn't these supernatural or tragic villain characters that are a part of the Batman canon, but the reality is that it's these followers, and let's face it, it's a lot of the rich white, if not white rich, then definitely a lot of angry white dudes. And I think we've all seen how that has affected what we try to do in this country, and I think it's a good thing. And again, getting into the police corruption and the mayoral race, I mean, this is definitely a movie that is at least trying to elevate beyond just, okay, we're going to tell a superhero story or a detective story, and we're going to try to get into the politics. So I'm not sure if it's totally successful, but I think part of what this movie is implying is that there needs to be some follow-up in terms of the discussions that are happening about corruption and who could really make a city better. And I will look forward to seeing, how that all develops in future Batman movies, which, given the state of both the writers and actors strike, we are probably not going to see this movie or a sequel until 2025 or 2026. So it's definitely going to be a little bit of time. But we have not yet mentioned Robert Pattinson, and he, of course, is another on-screen version of Batman, joining the likes of Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, George Clooney, Christian Bale, and, of course, Ben Affleck. And I guess if you want to technically throw Adam West in there as well, we have yet another on-screen live-action Batman. He apparently auditioned for this role while he was shooting the movie Tenet, and I guess he took a selfie in the bat suit just in case he didn't get the role, which I got to be honest, that is probably the most human thing that I've ever heard of Robert Pattinson doing. I guess he tried to sneakily do these auditions and not tell his director Christopher Nolan about it. But given that Christopher Nolan has eyes and ears everywhere, most likely, Nolan immediately figured it out and congratulated Robert Pattinson even before Pattinson had told anybody about it. So I guess you could say that Christopher Nolan still has his eyes and ears everywhere in the Batman universe, even though he is not even associated with Warner Brothers right now, as Oppenheimer came out through the Universal aspect of things. This is also the first version of Batman to address the eye makeup under the cowl. There was no makeup basically, but this time we actually get to see it, and I think it just makes Batman come off all the more emo, which I think some people have complained about it, but for my money, I think it works out really well. I definitely would like to see them tweak it a little bit as they get into the sequels, but we could get into that conversation later. So director Matt Reeves not only directed this movie, but is also the screenwriter, and he wrote this with Robert Pattinson in mind, not knowing if he would be interested in the role. And he watched Pattinson in the movie Good Time, was captivated by him, and this is why Reeves decided to imagine Pattinson in the role of Batman. And Pattinson was Reeves' top choice because he was always that version of what I saw in the page. I think of Bruce Wayne as this recluse rock star in a decaying manner. There's this part of me that so saw Rob as that, and I had no idea that he would be interested in playing this role at all. I thought, what if Rob doesn't want to play Batman? That would be a disaster. But Reeves didn't know that at the same time, Pattinson became fixated on the role of Batman without even knowing the status of the project. And they eventually came together. And that is why we have the movie that we do. And this is a good opportunity to talk about Robert Pattinson and kind of being introduced into this role, which I know caused a lot of controversy. But again, this always happens. And generally, they're always proven wrong. Because, I mean, for my money, I think that most of the Batman that have been cast have done a really good job. I would even include Ben Affleck in that conversation. But for me, Robert Pattinson has, I think Robert Pattinson is always, by some people, associated with the Twilight movies, and I think that is grossly unfair. Not just because even if the Twilight movies are bad, clearly Robert Pattinson is doing all he can to elevate them. And it's been a number of years since those have come out, and he has primarily done a lot of these indie movies, and he's done a really, really good job. And I think even you watch a movie like Tenet, and very clearly, this is a man who absolutely knows how to play the Batman character really well. So for my money, Robert Pattinson was a really, really good choice, and I think he makes this movie all the better.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because when the word got round, everyone was doing like the dude from Twilight, because they never knew that he was, or the mainstream audience doesn't know that he was doing all this indie work for 10 years after Twilight. So it's unfortunate. I hadn't seen any of his movies in that run. I mean, unfortunately, I've only seen him in Harry Potter, Tenet, and this. But still, like I don't hold it against the guy for being in Twilight. Clearly, like that gave producers enough confidence that this guy has star power. And the fact that he's been on the indie scene for 10 years, practicing his craft, and everyone was loving The Lighthouse around the time that this came out. So people were starting like, okay, you got this darker performance in Lighthouse. Is that going to be kind of like his Bruce Wayne? But then when Tenet came out, I saw him in that suit, and I was just like, oh, he's a perfect Bruce Wayne, like spot on. But then ironically, that's not the Bruce Wayne we get in this movie. So I'm glad they kind of I guess they downplayed or kind of bait and switched us a little bit in a good way, because of course you look at Robert Pattinson, the way that dude dresses up in public, it's like that's a Bruce Wayne for the public image, right? But they never do that in this movie. So I was kind of like, okay, they went away from that. So he's just going to be this recluse, and he's just not going to be in public much. He only comes out in public one time or twice as Bruce Wayne in the movie. So it was kind of surprising. But when you look at the way he works, this Robert Pattinson, the way he kind of works, it kind of fits what Bruce Wayne and Batman is. Maybe that's why he was so fixated on it, like some of these darker roles that he takes on. So I don't know. I think it was just right timing, right fit, and then of course with him looking to be the next Batman as well, That was perfect timing. And you got Matt Reeves coming off the trilogy with the Planet of the Apes. Everything was just kind of coming together at the right time. Unfortunately, the pandemic just kind of delayed the release of the movie, it feels. But other than that, it just felt like this was the perfect moment to kind of make a new Batman. Despite all the controversy with Ben Affleck trying to make his own at the time as well. If we could talk about that a little bit, I guess, that kind of fell through. And once Matt Reeves, jumped on board, it became like a totally Ben Affleckless movie, unfortunately. But, that's the way it goes. And I guess Ben Affleck has kind of come to peace with that as well. So everyone came out happy. And now we got Robert Pattinson for a long time in this role, because you can tell, like, he's so invested in it. He looks young already, even though he's in his 30s. He can play that younger kind of role, kind of like Tom Holland can. So I think you got him in the bag for at least 2-3 more Batman movies for sure.
Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson, their chemistry is such an important aspect of this movie. They've been friends for a number of years before this, and they had great chemistry. I think that is very much reflected in this movie. I don't think that we've seen chemistry on the screen in a superhero movie like this in quite some time. And of course, once again, it's Batman and Catwoman delivering the goods in terms of this. And yeah, I think they play off each other tremendously well. We also have to talk about, again, I think it's so amazing to me that, we criticized the Batman movies all those years ago for having too many villains. And in this case, we have the Catwoman, we have the Riddler, and we have the Penguin all in this movie. And it never feels overwhelming. I think so much of that has to do with we're not focusing on origin stories. We're kind of starting in the middle. I think that makes a tremendous difference. Colin Farrell, of course, is behind heavy prosthetics and is wearing a fat suit, which I have very mixed opinions about. But you cannot deny that if you put aside that aspect of it, you can't take away from the fact that those prosthetics make him unrecognizable, and his performance is really, really good. He, in a world where there is no Riddler, I would almost have preferred to have the Penguin as the main villain, just because Colin Farrell is so good in the role. The Riddler, partly inspired by the infamous Zodiac Killer, an unidentified serial killer who operated in Northern California in the 60s. The Zodiac used ciphers in his infamous letters, and it is again worth noting this movie heavily influenced by Seven. David Fincher also made a movie about the Zodiac Killer called Zodiac, and yeah, that is very much worth noting. So a little bit on kind of the three of the major villains from the Batman villain oeuvre, and I have to say, I think Zoe Kravitz. Catwoman isn't exactly a villain per se, but I think Zoe Kravitz, Colin Farrell, and Paul Dano, in their own ways, did a really, really great job as well.
Yeah, when I heard the casting of Paul Dano, I thought that's perfect. That's your modern Riddler, because he can act crazy based on what you saw in There Will Be Blood, which was 2007, and he was like 19 or whatever. So an older version of that, I can totally picture it, because that dude was psycho, borderline psycho in There Will Be Blood. And then, of course, you got Zoe Kravitz, and amazing casting there, especially because, like, I think she's got the physicality down, because, look, she's short, but, she can, like, move around very well like a Catwoman should be. You know what I mean? So, and I felt like she did a lot of her stunts, the way that the camera was kind of moving and stuff. So, I don't know, I just kind of felt like that was a perfect casting as well, because she's got the right body type to fit that role. And then Colin Farrell, I was just kind of thrown back. I was like, what are we doing here? I get, like, he's a great actor, but Penguin is, like, heavy set a little bit. And then I was like, fat suit? Are he's going to do the weight? And then when I saw the makeup, I was like, oh, he's going for Robert De Niro in Untouchables. Because if Robert De Niro took on this role now at his prime age, and when he did the Untouchables in '87, Robert De Niro would have totally just put on the weight naturally, the way he did in Untouchables. So I was like, okay, we're not doing the whole let's put 100 pounds on it and lose it, because that's probably the unhealthy way to do things now. But the fat suit, I was kind of questioning when I saw it. I was like, oh, this is it. This is going to work. Taken aback, because, like, it was just so, like, I couldn't believe it was Colin Farrell. Like, the voice, the way his mannerisms are, the way he has that dark humor on Batman, it's like you can barely tell it's him, but then once you recognize, like, that kind of high pitch in his voice when he's, like, laughing or whatever, it's like, oh, that's Colin Farrell. So it was so good, and I was shocked that the Oscars didn't, like, give the love that this movie needed on the technical side with the makeup, because I thought the makeup should have been nominated, and I don't think it was, which is unfortunate. Nor was the score, which is nuts. But that's another talk. We're going to talk about it at the end. But yeah, I love the casting in this, and I think even I wasn't so, even though I wasn't so sure on Colin Farrell, I was just kind of like taken aback that they were taking like A-list actors for smaller roles in this movie, and I was like, okay, they're really upping the cast on this, and they're trying to make it something special.
This is the first solo Batman film to be shot on digital because, as you know, Christopher Nolan always shoots everything on film. So what they were able to do, though, is to give it a different look, and so it doesn't feel so smooth. They ran the finished digital image through film, then scanned it back, and they did quite the process. I have to say, Brian, in my view, this is what all movies should be doing, because I think digital looks like crap. I think it consistently, especially bigger budget movies, I will say, I understand, especially for independent movies, like using digital is a huge cost-cutting measure, and I don't think it's nearly as bad. But when we're talking about these big budget movies, it makes such a difference. This movie, even though it was shot on digital, it doesn't feel like it was shot on digital, and I think it shows. I think it absolutely represents itself as a very different and unique looking movie compared to every superhero movie that's been made, and even amongst the Batman movies. And I know there's the running gag about each Batman movie literally getting darker, but for my money, I love the look of this movie throughout. And even though it can be really, really dark at times, literally and figuratively, I think that it just has a very different feel, because again, with so many of these awful looking DC movies, and we will have a brief flash conversation, and you and I might get into an argument, but the Batman just outclasses every other superhero movie from this decade in terms of its look.
Yeah, and of course I went on that rant a couple weeks ago about digital versus 35 millimeter, and this is kind of like the modern day process to make it look like 35 millimeter. But I totally see what you're saying, and it does work because it does make it seem more cinematic, and you kind of see grain even though it's digital. So that kind of gives it an older kind of feel. And the way this movie looks. The only criticism I would say is like I wish there was some popping colors here and there, like a few select colors that would pop, but everything seems kind of washed out. And I get it, because the idea is that the city's always raining. You know what I mean? It's always wet and dirty. And you know what I mean? And that's kind of like the symbolism. So if you look at every scene, almost exactly like Seven, where every scene is just raining, very similar feel. So the way that they set up the city, I just wish that they kind of established more of like the city itself. I just kind of feel like they showed us two like locations, like the Gotham City Square Garden, and then some parts of this, like the club, like, and that was pretty much it. And you got some smaller areas there, but I just wish they gave it more scale. You know what I mean? And more of a mapping of the idea. Like, you like the way things are mapped out, I wish they did that with more of Gotham City in this case. And I think it kind of took a backseat a little bit, but usually, Gotham is almost like its own character itself in these movies. And it still was, but I just felt like it kind of took a backseat, because I felt like in like the Burton, Batman's, we got a great visual idea of what the city looked like. In this case, everything seems kind of like modern, washed out. So, but I hopefully, in the next movie, they kind of reverse that with the themes, you know what I mean? So if they go a little brighter in the next one, hopefully we see more of the city and what it really looks like. Because at night, everything's just, you can't see shit and everything's raining and stuff. But that's kind of the vibe because of the whole state of the city at that moment.
All right, without any further ado, let's get into the categories, starting with the heroes. And really, the main hero is, of course, Robert Pattinson as Batman. This is not an origin story. We do not see Thomas Wayne and Martha get murdered. I think the absolute best part of this for me is that Robert Pattinson is in the suit for so much of this movie. And I know what you're thinking. It's a Batman movie. What's the big deal? It's like, it feels like every single Batman movie, they are obsessed with not having Bruce Wayne in the effing suit. And it feels good that he is in it so much. And we get very little of Bruce Wayne, which I think it kind of goes the other way. But I am very much in favor of, for this movie especially, just having him in the suit. I think he looks great in it. He's got that great jawline that's perfect for being Batman. I do think he needs to be less brooding as Bruce Wayne. Like, I like broody Batman. It's fine. I even like the beginning and ending narration. I think it's a nice button on the movie. I'm glad they didn't do it throughout the movie, but I think at the beginning and end, I think it works out well because you get the real contrast of like who he is at the beginning of the movie versus who he is at the end. And I think that he carries out the theme really well. This idea of he is vengeance, but at the end of the movie, he is hope. And look, I think this is a movie that does some really subtle things in terms of the camera work, in terms of the mystery, and I give them a ton of credit for that. But there is a moment when Batman is literally leading people by light into the light, and then a couple scenes later, he's doing his narration, and he's literally carrying somebody as the sun is rising on a new day in Gotham. And look, this is not subtle, but I think it works out really well. I think for a movie that really plays it fair in terms of like, this is kind of a grittier, even more gritty than the Nolan movies. But I like those two moments because they really do symbolize this idea that you mentioned of becoming more hopeful and getting away from the vengeance. And I mean, it's really well done. Like, on the rewatch, I was really impressed with how Batman falls into the water. Like, he lets go, falls into the water, and you're like, well, what's he gonna do? And then he takes out the flare and he's leading people to safety. It's a really great moment because I think one of my biggest complaints about superhero movies lately has been that they don't do enough of that. They don't do enough of the saving of people, and I just think it works out really well. And yeah, Robert Pattinson as Batman, and I'll talk a little bit about Bruce Wayne in a second, but I want to hear your thoughts on him playing the Batman character. Again, I think he hits it out of the park. I think this is one of the best performances in terms of Batman that I've seen on the screen.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement. It's just unfortunate we didn't get the whole billionaire playboy, which, again, I think that's to transition into the hope period of Batman, where he's going to embrace the hope side and kind of maybe become more of a public figure in that case, because that's kind of what we want to see, the Bruce Wayne from like Batman Begins and Dark Knight. And I think that was ideal when they casted him, but they never went down that route in the first movie. Again, I think that was a good kind of bait switch to kind of throw you off. You expect this nice, looking Bruce Wayne, clean suit, clean shaven, but instead he's still emo when he goes out in public. So that was really like, okay, this is a different kind of Batman. He's so angsty, and you can tell like he's in his early 20s, because I think all of us in our early 20s had that, kind of angst a little bit that kind of came out of high school a little bit, thinking that, we can take over the world, or, that feeling of taking over the world and changing it, or some kind of feeling like that, and that naivete. And he kind of experiences it in this movie because he realizes that things have gone way beyond out of his control, and that he's sort of responsible for inspiring the whole chaos that, comes as the result of the Riddler at the end of the movie. So, there's a lot for him to like take on in terms of like responsibility, accepting the fact that he can be a force of change in Gotham City. So there's all these great themes like kind of layered into this movie as him when he's Batman. And I think seeing less of Bruce Wayne is such a different change of pace. I really enjoyed it. We got to see him more be the detective, and that's kind of what I've been wanting since like Dark Knight. You know what I mean? It's like I want more of a grounded detective story with my Batman movies, and this was it. And he just, he was doing all the studying, but again, he's not the world's greatest detective yet, which I like. He's making mistakes, which I like because he's a young 20-year-old, and the only way you can learn and become better is by making mistakes, and he's making mistakes, and that's probably gonna lead him to become the world's greatest detective in the next movie, I think. And I think that's kind of the way you should do these kind of arcs, the way that Matt Reeves laid the arc work for Caesar in the Planet of the Apes trilogy. You see him rise from like the depths all the way to the top and becoming the leader of the whole, ape nation or whatever. Like, you can see where Batman's like arc is gonna be in this. Like, it's the next movie clearly has to be him being a symbol of hope. It's just so perfect for what this arc is telling us with the narration at the beginning, and the fact that we actually got narration in this movie. Like the fact that he starts off by saying one of the first things, like, "I'm a nocturnal animal." Like, God, that's such a Batman line. I'm sure that was a line from the comics or something. Like, a nocturnal animal is such a way to like Batman to describe himself. It's so perfect. So that immediately I'm hooked, and I've been waiting for the narration, the voiceover. That's always like in the comics, so you can get into Batman's head and the way he's thinking. So all that's going great. But I just wanted more Jeffrey Wright. You know what I mean? I wanted more Gordon. And I know that sounds weird because Gordon has his own show. And he got 5 seasons of his own show. So I get why they didn't give us more personal background to Gordon, but it just felt like Gordon was there to serve Batman. And it's kind of unfortunate because it felt like Jeffrey Wright had so much more to give in this role, even though he was on screen a lot. I just felt like they didn't dig into his background enough, and that's kind of a shame.
See, I actually disagree with you on this. I went into this thinking, Jeffrey Wright was underserved, but I will say I think he has more to do than you think. And again, I think there's a real balance that you're going for here, especially when Batman is by himself and doesn't have a partner. But to me, I think Catwoman does a lot of the physical partnering up with Batman, and I think that actually works out better. I mean, Jeffrey Wright, again, when you are Gordon, you're really having to balance between being a police officer and being supportive of Batman. And I think for the story that they're trying to tell, having more Jeffrey Wright actually doesn't really make sense, because I don't think we necessarily want the POV of the Gotham police. I think the best part of this movie is that we are really only seeing the police through Batman's point of view, and I think that gets literalizes in the moment when Batman gets knocked out and he wakes up in the police station. And I love those shots of Batman being surrounded and fighting his way out. They do it multiple times. Works out every single time, and especially the moment with the cops. And it's really great. And I will say that there isn't a lot of humor in this movie, but some of the best line exchanges are between Pattinson and Wright. I love when Gordon says, "Why do you punch me so hard? You should have held back." And Batman's like, I did hold back. And I was tremendously amused by that. And I think their interactions are great for what they were. For my money, I think Jeffrey Wright was fine. I think that in terms of the time given, I'm glad. Look, I am glad the time is given to Gordon as opposed to Alfred. I think Andy Serkis is probably my least favorite casting decision. I just don't think he's a good Alfred. Like, I love Andy Serkis, and I think we have talked about him very positively when we talked about Lord of the Rings, when we talked about Planet of the Apes, when we talk about Black Panther. Like, I am a huge Andy Serkis guy. I just don't think he was the right choice for Alfred, and I'm gonna say that until it changes. And I don't buy the relationship with Batman. I don't buy the patriarchal feels, and I think they kind of explain it, but I just don't buy. I don't buy their scene in the hospital specifically. And I think a lot of it is because, again, I think Andy Serkis as Alfred is a miscast.
Interesting, because I get why they went with Andy Serkis. It's like you don't want a totally old Alfred. You want a guy who feels like a dude who adopted a kid when he was in his 40s, and now this is where he's at now. So I get the casting. I understand it. I was really into that hospital scene. I'm buying into the relationship. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the fact that he's like, it just seems like he's playing a dad, and I think that's a totally different vibe than all the other Alfreds we've gotten. Because all the other Alfreds have just been like master servant kind of relationship, and then with little quips here and there, like, "Are you gonna go out tonight? Are you gonna find a woman tonight? Are you actually gonna live your life tonight?" And he's not really doing that. He's just kind of being like supportive of what Batman's doing in this movie, but he's really like kind of warning him, like, "You should stop this. Like, this is getting really too personal." So he's got more of that father figure to him, and then I think that's what I kind of click with, because it's a different type of relationship. But I get your criticism, because he's not as quippy, you know what I mean, as previous Alfreds. So I get it, and it is what it is. And I don't know. I just felt like this Alfred wasn't as smart as the other Alfreds as well. Like, I feel like that Alfred, yeah, Jeremy Irons, I think, would probably not open up that letter with a bomb that's clearly in it. I think he would have been like, "Oh, this is probably a bomb. I should not open this." So there was some of that going on in this movie. Like, it's clear, like, not everyone is at the top of their game yet. This is still early stages in the career of Batman, so everyone's gonna be making mistakes. But I felt like Alfred made a major mistake there. But that's kind of a reflection of where they're at in their relationship, I feel. And the thing with Jeffrey Wright is that I think because we got like Gordon's family in The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, I think that's where I'm like kind of coming from. It's like I really want to see him with his family, because at one point in this movie, Batman goes, he's not going to come after you, and he's like, why is he not going to come after me, the Riddler? He goes, you're not corrupt. So, and I was like, oh, how do we know he's not corrupt? You know what I mean? Like, does he know? So at that point, it's like, okay, show me something that shows me he's not corrupt, but we never kind of got that. So even in the second movie, if they decide to turn him heel, which I know is a bad idea, but you kind of left it open for that to happen if you don't go into his background like this. So I'm just saying, without going into his background to show these kind of things, you leave it open to bad writers coming in and switching things up. So
I decided to do some quick research while you were speaking about this. I think Sean Bean would have been a much better Alfred than Andy Serkis.
Okay, that I can agree with. That's the same age. Yeah, and then I can picture it.
Speaking of Lord of the Rings, of course, but I think that he gets you a lot of the same vibes, but I would buy him more as the conflicted patriarchal figure, and obviously a lot of that has to do with him playing Ned Stark in Game of Thrones. But yeah, I think someone like him being in the role, I would just buy it a lot more.
Okay, so I'm looking at the burning questions, and my bonus burning question is not listed. Should I ask it now?
Is it about Alfred? Then if it is, then you probably should. Go for it.
Okay, so do you think that A, we're going to ever find out who killed Bruce's parents, and B, is Alfred lying?
I almost hope we don't. I would, again, we will never, with the exception of next week, I never want to talk about the murder of Batman's parents ever again. I would rather just leave the memories alone and focus on Gotham. Like, if the sequel is going to kind of be a no man's land, then let it be that. Let's move away from that. I mean, again, we've seen Amazing Spider-Man. We've seen what happens when we start to focus on the past a little bit too much and lore and shit like that. I would rather, again, just leave the memories alone.
Gotcha. And is Alfred lying about? Because this whole thing is about him finding out that his parent. We're kind of skipping ahead a little bit.
See, to me, the idea is that when they have that scene in the hospital, that is Alfred being truthful. So I would think that he is being truthful in that moment.
Okay, because I've had this discussion like immediately after when the first time I saw this.
I mean, it's
a lot of my
possible.
Friends, a lot of my friends do think that Alfred is lying and that he doesn't want to admit to Bruce that his parents were involved with Falcone. So it's unfortunate. I mean, that's part of the drama. That's part of the great writing of this, is that soap opera drama that kind of elevates to another level. So I think that's all part of that. So my score for the heroes is an 8. Zoe Kravitz, I think, again, perfect casting. Just little subtle things like drinking the milk was great. And I love, of course, we'll talk about that in the score, but her score is just, it's a homage, plus it's new at the same time. It's great.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, you really notice it on a rewatch. Her walking through the nightclub is just a great moment on its own. Says so much about who she is as a character. I mean, Zoe Kravitz to me is somebody that's tremendously underrated. And I mean, you look at this, you watch her in High Fidelity. I mean, she has a star quality to her that I'm very surprised that nobody else has been able to unlock. But she's great here. I'm putting the mayor in this category as well. She comes off as incredibly naive, and I mean, clearly that is an intentional choice, but I wonder if we are, and I don't think we are, but I think it would be really interesting to explore the idea of when a city is in distress, that's when female mayors, that's when black mayors get elected. I mean, you look at 2008, I think it's one of the reasons that Barack Obama was put into the president's chair. It's just a thing that happens, and I think it's very interesting that they've gone in this direction, and we will see if this is an angle that gets pursued. But I will agree with you in terms of the score. Mine is also an 8.
It's funny you say that because we just got a new LA mayor named Karen Bass. Right after, like, the election took place after the movie came out, folks. So there you go. Look up Karen Bass and all the LA shit that was going on. We even got a corrupt politician or two that went to jail recently. So it's all kind of real. It's all kind of real. But
And your
yeah.
city council is racist as well. Can't forget that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's all a little too real in LA right now, but it's not over the top, like crime all over the place like that. It's a little exaggerated on TV, folks, but still, like, this shit does happen in real life, obviously. So
All right, let's talk about the villains. What a cavalcade. Just an absolute murderer's row here. Paul Dano, I mean, he gets to cook for 2 scenes, and I mean, he's great. Colin Farrell is great as the Penguin. His performance in the car chase scene. Nobody ever gets Academy Award nominations for what they do in a car chase, but my God, his reaction to at first thinking the Batman is dead and then the reveal of the Batmobile. I mean, it's something that you saw in the trailer, and I'm very disappointed that moment was spoiled. My God, though, Colin Farrell just sells the hell out of it. It's so good, man. It is so good. I'm not sure if we needed a Joker tease. I just don't. I get it's Batman. You have to have the Joker, but I just don't know if we needed it in this movie, because everything else is so good. John Turturro, again, just like Paul Dano, he's in like 3 scenes and he steals the movie. Like, he's so good as Falcone. Tom Wilkinson is so bad in Batman Begins. Like, he is the low light of that movie, and John Turturro just plays Falcone. Like, the thing that there's a couple things that John Turturro does well. Like, he is able to play a scumbag, but he is able to give this artifice of class that I don't think that a lot of actors can pull off. I just think that, the way that he plays this, like, he is so smooth, but yet he is in the moment almost ready to kill his daughter, Catwoman. Oh man, he's so good. Peter Skarsgård, again, 2 scenes as the DA of Gotham, but he's in a really important scene in the church when he gets blown up, and he's so good. Another Skarsgård, but again, just across the board. I love the commissioners. They're only in the movie for like 2 minutes total, but between the facial hair and the accents, they are just incredible. I mean, just across the board, the way they casted the villains, the way they wrote the villains, I think that the villains feel very tangible in this movie. I think they feel very lived in, and I'm incredibly impressed across the board with just what they're able to do. And again, you're talking about individuals who are in 1, 2, 3 scenes, but they're so memorable. Like, I can distinctly describe the scene in the jail with the Riddler and the Batman. I can describe the car chase, and even the scene with the Penguin and Commissioner Gordon and Batman, and when Falcone is monologuing to Catwoman, and the scene in the nightclub with Peter Skarsgård being a drunken asshole, and even the commissioners yelling at Batman. It's just, this is so good, man. I'm gonna give this an 8. And the only reason that I'm giving this an 8 is because I almost think we could have used more of the motivations of the Riddler and of the Penguin. Like, I think we get a good idea of who they are as characters, but I almost wish we had a little bit more in terms of motivation. But my God, I mean, you will generally not find a better just cavalcade of villains than this movie.
Yeah, I was kind of joking when I was texting Jerome while watching this, and I was just like, it feels like every actor is trying to steal the show. It's just like, and that's a lot of actors who try to steal the show. And even when, like, Skarsgård was on screen as the DA, I mean, look, he was probably not high as fuck, but he seemed so high as fuck. And, like, just the way he was acting in the club was like, dude, this guy is, like, zoned into what the role is right now. He's, like, doing the job and knows his role right now. Even though he's in it for like 10 minutes, him as the DA was just it felt like he was stealing the show. And you mentioned, like, John Turturro stealing the show, and then Colin Farrell coming in and stealing the show, and then Paul Dano not necessarily stealing the show, but just making you feel so uncomfortable that this is like not the Riddler of, past lore. You know what I mean? It's not that laughing, stupid green suit Riddler. It's something completely different. So mix all that together, man, and I feel like, this is like, the rogues gallery, at its best, when you have, if Penguin got more to do, I felt like then you got, then it's going to be a little more too crowded. With Penguin in the side role being like the henchman for Falcone makes more sense in this. And then, of course, you see the ending where he goes against Falcone once Falcone's revealed as the rat. So, that's great. I love Falcone's scenes with Zoe Kravitz. Like, I think that's what, if you show that to a casual audience, they're going to buy into that more, I feel, because that's the kind of like soap opera drama that people love in the casual audience. I mean, that whole thing about you're my dad and you never acknowledge me as your daughter and you just use my mom and you killed my mom and you didn't care that they took me away or blah 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 and you only cared about me when I came back to the club or blah blah blah. That whole drama there for father and daughter is just fantastic stuff, man. And I know it's cheesy, but sometimes good cheese can just really you can just sink your teeth into it, man, and just buy into it and have fun with these storylines. So this idea that she wants revenge and she's all about vengeance now and she thinks that's what Batman's all about, and then once Batman starts changing, she starts changing her feelings towards him, so it becomes more complex. And then you got that standoff at the end where she's about to shoot the guy that killed her friend, and then you find out that Carmine Falcone, it just gets deeper and deeper and deeper once you get layered into the performance of Carmine Falcone. It just feels like he went less Sopranos and more Michael Corleone. And I think a lot of actors these days, when they do mob roles, they see Sopranos as like the go-to. But I think you should be doing The Godfather and doing more of like the subtleties, holding yourself back, and then bursts of violence at random times to scare the audience to thinking like, oh shit, this guy's not to be fucked with. Because once you find out that he killed her friend or whatever, it's just very disturbing. And I think that's what you need when these villains are like very grounded. You need more of that disturbingness that kind of makes you feel like, wow, this is not just a comic book villain type thing. This is like real life horror kind of shit. And these characters are very, very evil people, and I like that. So you mix that all in, it's like Batman's got like a lot of work to do in the next couple movies to fight back, because he got the Riddler and Falcone's out, but now Penguin's on the rise. So mix all that in, and it's you're due for a good next couple movies, and I can't wait for Penguin to come back and be a major player in the series and not just be a one-off like all these villains are. So I like that idea. So I'm going with an 8. Felt like Paul Dano was just kind of going over the top sometimes, which is fine. But I think that role you kind of need it, because that role is about a disturbed child growing up in a failed system kind of thing. Being an orphan, growing up in that system must be a nightmare, and being a victim of that, I think that's a good way to show, again, this corruption and how it spreads throughout the city and affects people different ways.
I think normally when we get to the point of talking about this story, I think it's like, oh, this is generally the weakest aspect of the movie. I have to say, for my money, this is the strongest aspect of the movie. And I think getting into some of the nuances is difficult, because this is a very layered story. So I'm going to bottom line this. Essentially, what happens is that Thomas Wayne and some of the more powerful people in Gotham have formed this renewal pact, and there's millions and billions of dollars involved with this pact, and there may or may not be some corruption during Thomas Wayne's time, as he is about to run for mayor. He is murdered, and then the organization goes fully corrupt, and they're just stealing the money, laundering it perhaps, and it is to the point where the money is not anywhere close to actually being helpful for the people that it is intended to help. And Bruce Wayne is still feeling the ramifications of his parents' death, and now having to come to grips with the fact that his father may not have been as virtuous of a person as he may have believed. As first we learn that Thomas Wayne saved his life at first, and then may or may not have hired him to murder a reporter. I wish we had gotten even more about the reporter in some ways, and I'm not somebody who really
I
likes
think that's
flashbacks.
the sequel, because you know who that is, right? Allegedly.
Who is it?
It's supposed to be Hush.
Okay. I mean, is it Hush the Riddler, though?
No, that's the cartoon. That's where they fucked up. In the cartoon movie, they made Riddler and Hush the same person. Hush is supposed to be this best friend that Bruce Wayne had that kind of had like a bad or they had a falling out or something, but it was a separate person. So they fucked it up in the
Okay.
cartoon.
Okay. Let's go with that. Yeah, I mean that sounds good. So, there's murder, there's intrigue. Catwoman is involved because she is the daughter of Falcone, so that is why she is involved. Her roommate is also closely engaged with what's going on, and her roommate even gets murdered at one point in this movie. You've got all kinds of corruption. There's a lot of revelations. There's, again, this is a movie that, even though it costs 185 to 200 million dollars, I think a lot of that cost is coming from having to start production multiple times, both because of the pandemic and because of Robert Pattinson getting COVID shortly after returning to set. So I think that you look at the budget of this movie, and look, I think the movie looks really good, but there are not as many bombastic action scenes as we've become accustomed to, and even compared to some of the Nolan movies. Like, I think the ending is really great thematically, but it's again, it's not as bombastic as I think we're used to. There's no big blue beam in the sky, and I think that's a huge positive. But you look at the car, you look at the car chase. I think that's really good. I think the moments in the garden are really good, but again, I don't think that you're seeing this. This doesn't feel like, okay, we're getting into some ridiculous territory. But overall, I still think it works. I think the story is really nuanced. I think they're trying to explore some different facets of the Batman character. Another runner is Batman continues to see the mayor's son, Don Mitchell's son, is seen in a couple of scenes, and obviously being an orphan to some extent, this is something that Bruce Wayne can sympathize with. So we see him kind of identifying with him in an early scene, and then literally saving the kid's life, which is one of my favorite moments in the entire movie, is when Bruce Wayne dives in to save the kid in the church. And I love that they don't draw attention to it, but again, I think it's such a great moment, because I think it really does show that Batman is trying to do better, and it is it's a really great moment. And again, we've talked a lot about the various villains, we've talked about a lot of the characters. I think this movie just comes along at a generally good pace, even though it is very, very, it is nut hugging 3 hours essentially. And yeah, I think the story is incredibly strong. I am giving this a 9 out of 10, which is one of the higher story scores that I've ever given for a superhero movie. And yeah, I think this earns it. This is one of the strongest superhero stories ever.
Yeah, it's up there probably in terms of, like, I would say the best scripts that I've kind of like experienced in a superhero movie. It's this one, Batman Begins, Dark Knight are kind of up there as well. It's hard to think of that because those are like the top scripts that pop into my head, especially when, they taught us Batman Begins in writing class. So, but in this case, I think this is going to be one of the more modern versions. Like, it's so layered and detailed, man. Like I said, it's got that element of the soap opera. It's got the element of, the social commentary about white elitists corrupting the city, and you layer that in with like Batman learning how to become Batman. And here's where I want to talk about like some of these scenes where he makes mistakes. That's kind of related to him being this, rich white guy. I mentioned the whole Spanish translation error. Like, he just assumes that Alfred did it correctly and didn't even bother to look up a Google Translate or whatever. And you got the Penguin making fun of him, like, "Don't you know Spanish, Ellen Law?" So, that just makes Batman look like, okay, I got to learn from this mistake. You know what I mean? And then, of course, the tool. Now, this is where it gets a little interesting, and we can kind of discuss this now, I guess. But the Riddler doesn't know Bruce Wayne is Batman. And I've come to that conclusion, like, for certain now, because why would he try to kill Bruce Wayne if he doesn't, if he knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman and he tried to kill him early in the movie, then he knows he's trying to kill Batman. So obviously that can't be it. And he assumes Batman is working class because he assumes that Batman figured out the whole carpet thing with the tool, but he didn't. And so when he goes back to the scene, back to the Riddler's apartment, and he's there with the cop who is working class, who is a person of color, identifies the tool and says, like, it's like a lifter for the carpet. And then Batman's like, what? And then because he never used a tool in his life probably like that. So once you start realizing carpet, looks down at the floor, sees the green carpet, takes the green carpet off and finds the map and sees the whole plan of the city, being flooded or whatever. So it took him that long to figure it out. But if he was a working class dude who worked with his hands, he would have figured out the thing much earlier. And that's the whole point, because the Riddler assumes Batman is on his side and he assumes Batman is working class. So I thought that's the most fascinating thing about the whole Riddler thing with the whole Batman relationship to me in this movie, is that like he expected him to just accept him and they were going to be working together. But once, the Riddler starts realizing that's going out the door, he starts screaming immediately in the cell, like, no, this is not supposed to happen like this or whatever. And he starts realizing that Batman is not as smart as he realizes, and he even tells that to his face. So again, that tells you Batman is not the world's greatest detective yet. He's still learning. And I think that's what you're going to get in the second movie. And then it's too late and the city floods and now he's got to save people. So, just that whole thing. And then the idea of him, it's not it's not the Riddler who has to physically fight Batman, because that would be a no contest, obviously. So, of course, you get the henchmen and those followers online, which, of course, is like, obviously very reminiscent of January 6th, which is very scary. But, that shit, that happens. So this story, man, is so like realistic and grounded, and it's deep, and it's got these different like themes, and it's got like casual stuff that casual audiences can bite into, like especially with that Carmine Falcone, Zoe Kravitz, father daughter, like that stuff really, like, I swear that stuff does connect with people, and that's the kind of shit they put on soap operas every day, and that's why soap operas have been on for 40 years. So when you mix all that in, you got all the right elements for like a good movie that can stand the test of time. And I kind of compare this to like a Rear Window. And at the time when Rear Window came out, I wasn't or when I watched it in college, like I wasn't the biggest fan of it. And then over time, like I just kind of grew to love it more for the little details and the mystery of it all and that kind of thing. So I kind of find it similar to this situation here, where at first I wasn't so high on it, but now the script is just like, it's so good. Like you can't deny how good it is. It's a 9 out of 10.
So we've been simpatico on our first three scores. Let's get to the technical aspects. Again, I think this is another very strong aspect of the film. For me, especially on the rewatch, it's an all-time banger of a score. Michael Giacchino does it again. The Catwoman stuff, the Batman score is, to me, this might be the best Batman-specific score that we've ever had. No disrespect to Danny Elfman or Hans Zimmer, but my God, I mean, this is just that repetitive, those same repetitive four notes. It works, man. It just simply works. So for my money, I'll before I even get into the rest of it, I'll let you talk about the score. For me, this score alone is worth the money.
Yeah, it's so hypnotic. It's like, and it's very simple because it's like, deep piano chords or whatever. And it's very similar to kind of like The Thing, but very like specific and deeper. And then of course, when you hear the Catwoman theme, it's weird because the way I kind of hear it in my head, it's almost as if there's an actual cat stepping on a piano slowly, if that makes sense. And that kind of is what they did in the Tim Burton movies with Danny Elfman in terms of Michelle Pfeiffer's theme. And you can hear elements of that too. So it's almost like, again, this homage that's new and it's still kind of fresh. And then like once she starts doing different shit, like there's alterations of the theme. So I really love that Catwoman theme. It just fits so well. I think it's way better than the Hans Zimmer one. Yeah, and then of course the Batman theme is just so hypnotic. And then like I love the music. It's really like dramatic and almost operatic at times. So it's very up and down, but in a good way. Like it really heightens the senses, and like if you put it loud in your house or something like that, you're really gonna have a vibe, like a really deep vibe. So yeah, it's really great. The thing that I'm like kind of criticizing in the tech area is more of the colors. I'm a colors kind of guy. I just felt like, I don't know, in this movie, like if you were gonna go for the darker tone, at least have one color maybe pop out, like a red. Like one, in the next movie, make it like a blue color that stands out or something like that. Have these thematic kind of colors. In this case, I felt like they were going for the red because I don't know if you remember the advertisement, it was all black and red. So I thought that's what they were kind of going for. But then when the movie came out, they kind of went away from that. It kind of looked like a washed out Seven kind of look. And if you watch Seven, there's no bright colors in that movie at all. But I felt like the way that you could have set this up is like, at least have one bright color like red, and that that can kind of symbolize vengeance. But they didn't really play into that as much, so that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm giving it an 8. The score is amazing. I just felt like the costumes and the makeup, of course, are great, especially Penguin. But I just kind of wanted more from like the color scheme a little bit.
I'm giving this a 9. I think this movie looks spectacular. I think there are points when it might be a little too dark, but for my money, I think this movie is extremely well paced for being 3 hours. It doesn't have that digital look. I love the car chase scene. I mean, I think in many ways that is the centerpiece. I love the way that they shoot everything at the garden. It doesn't feel CGI. I mean, the thing to me is that this movie just feels so tactile, and that's something that I've become increasingly noticing. I also love the look of Gotham as well. And I think the costuming, I love Batman's suit. I love Catwoman's outfits. I love the way that they suit up Falcone. I love the design of, what Gordon is wearing. I just think this is strong across the board. I'm actually going higher. I'm giving this a 9.
Wow. Usually I'm the one with the high tech score, but I guess I'm just being kind of like too picky, but that's just, that's just kind of my thing. It's always been colors with me, and like for me, colors can play even more into the story, and I kind of feel like they didn't play into the colors as much, and it's went all dark, which is fine. Like I said, it's an homage to 7. So
I am also somebody who is in favor of colors, but Batman is not the franchise that I'm necessarily gonna bring it up as an issue unless Harley Quinn and Joker are involved. Then I want the purples to really stand out in the reds. But this is not that movie, so I'm probably much more forgiving of it. The Legacy, this movie did make $770 million, despite the fact that it is a really dark movie. I don't know, man. I think this is being forgotten, and it sucks. I think it really sucks, and I am still hopeful that we are able to get these movies and that they continue to be successful, even in James Gunn's DC universe, because I think this has a chance to be something special. So I'm also concerned, like, maybe there have been too many Batman movies over the course of the last 15 years or so. When you combine the Justice League part of it too, and everything that's happening with the Flash this year, and having literally 3 Batmen in that movie. So it's just there might be some Batman specific burnout, but I'm hopeful that when the sequel comes out, that this is also really, really good, because I think this specific version of the character is something that is worth exploring more. My Legacy score, this is my lowest. I'm giving it a 7.
I'm going to give it a 7 as well, but only because I've noticed one thing, and this is like the only solo Batman movie that's not been played on TV constantly. Has it not? Like, it's never been on TV yet, right?
I mean, this movie literally only came out 18 months ago, so I don't think it's fair to necessarily count that as an evaluation yet. I think that's something like in 3 years, maybe we can talk about that as an issue, but I don't think it's something we could talk about right now.
Yeah, that's the problem, I think. So that's why I come at a 7 right now. But I feel like once this gets the traction on TV, because I feel like that's where usually, when we're growing up as kids, like the Batman movies are playing on TV, the old ones, and then you get ready for the new ones. That's how they get you ready, right? So in this case, they haven't done that yet. And I don't know, of course, Warner Brothers is, Lord knows what's going on up there right now in the corporate offices and what they're thinking. But yeah, this has not been playing on TV. Like, this movie should be playing on TNT like regularly at this point, I feel. But it hasn't yet. You know what I mean? And
you know what has been, though? Back to the Future, and it's great.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, why do they? I don't know. Look, I love Back to the Future, but I feel like if you're marketing right now, don't you want to market the new Batman movie that just came out and get some traction and get people talking about it again? I don't know. That's just me, but that's the big thing I noticed, is that this not getting a TV run like the usual, like other Batman. I mean, Batman Begins has been on TV like thousands of times since it came out, and I think that's helped its legacy as well. So that's why my legacy score is a 7 right now. It could probably change over time, but I think overall it doesn't really affect the main score too much, obviously, but it'll just increase and make the score higher over time. But 7 out of 10 right now.
All right, my total score is a 41.
Mine's a 40, and I think this is the 5th Batman movie in the Pantheon.
This is the 5th solo Batman movie to make it into the Pantheon, joining Batman Mask of the Phantasm, joining Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, as well as The Dark Knight Rises. So the entire Christopher Nolan trilogy is in, and the first of what may be a Matt Reeves trilogy is also in. So congratulations to this. And yeah, it's great to have a movie with we got Robert Pattinson in the Pantheon technically, and John Turturro. So really, really good stuff. So anything else before we get to the burning questions?
I think that's it. The one thing I forgot to mention though is that I think the big difference in terms of this Bruce Wayne is that he's starting to realize that his mom had mental health issues, and I think that's a realistic thing where if you find out like a parent has mental health issues, you're really like freaking out that you also have mental health issues. And I think at that moment when he finds out on TV, you can see in his face like, oh shit, am I not normal? You know, that kind of feeling. So I thought that was a real moment, you know, for Bruce Wayne. I thought that was a real life moment that a lot of people go through. So I think that's one of those revelations that once the audience is like exposed to it, it's like, oh shit, is Bruce Wayne just crazy, and that Batman is not really the righteous person we think he is, and he's just crazy. So that I like that questioning of his character, and we're never going to get an answer, obviously, unless, you know, my idea after I watched this, I was like, Jerome, what about a show where, you know, Batman just goes to therapy every week?
All I'm going to say is we're going to return to that conversation for next week's episode. That's all I'm going to say.
Did I just call something that I didn't know was coming ahead of time?
We'll see.
Holy
I'm not going to say anything.
I did it again.
All right, where does Robert Pattinson rank amongst the Batman right now after one movie? I have him slotted number 3. I have him above Affleck, Kilmer, and Clooney. He has not touched the top of the line, but if we get another good Batman movie, he could very easily be number 2.
I have him at number 4 right now. So out of the 7 George Clooney, 6 Val Kilmer, 5 Michael Keaton, 4 Robert Pattinson, 3 Adam West, 2 Christian Bale, number 1 Ben Affleck, and I know people are going to hate me for that, but Batfleck is my Batman, and yeah, you know my feelings on that.
What do you hope for from a sequel? I really, really, really want No Man's Land. That's what I'm hoping for. I almost want like vignettes. I want it to almost be episodic, where Batman is catching villains and restoring hope, and yeah, that's kind of what I want. And if you want to introduce, the rumor is that Timothée Chalamet may be cast as Robin, which if you thought Robert Pattinson was Emo's Batman, let me tell you, it ain't going to get any better if you bring in Chalamet. But that's what I want to see. I want to see, and I know we got a little bit of No Man's Land in The Dark Knight Rises, but I want to see him, you know, going at it with various villains and do something that perhaps is a little bit more episodic and different, to where maybe he's not facing one villain, but he is having to go through various villains.
I think that's what they kind of set up. It feels like at least the beginning of the next movie is going to be. I mean, they have to acknowledge the whole flooding and what the ramifications are, and I mean that's a whole story within itself, and that's probably going to be the rise of Penguin, and that's what they tease. I don't know if we're going to get that in the Penguin show, which we forgot to kind of mention, that there is a Penguin show coming on in HBO Max. Or excuse me, sorry, Max. Yeah, that's going to be interesting as well. So my hope for a sequel is that follows this trend of, like, you know, this movie's about vengeance and it's turning into hope. So I want the second movie to be about hope. And then the third movie, you know, this idea of the renewal fund, right? So what if the renewal fund is kind of, you know, the theme is renewal? That's when you introduce Robin to kind of bring in this fresh blood and kind of renew the franchise with this young Robin coming in. And you got this Robert Pattinson, whatever Robin you want to pick. And that kind of fits the whole theme of renewal. And I would take it even further if you want to. I mean, if they already set up this Arkham Asylum, give me a fucking Arkham Asylum movie that I've been waiting for. Like, you gave me the grounded Batman with the voiceover, the detective work and stuff. Give me the freaky, like, Arkham Asylum where he's drugged out and tripping out and just, you know, it's not supernatural necessarily. It's just a dude freaking out in a mental asylum and things seem supernatural to him. If you've ever read that comic, it's freaky as hell. It's short. I recommend it. Yeah, I kind of eventually want to see.
Number 3, should Matt Reeves have been considered, or should he be considered for a Star Wars movie? So this is what I'm going to say in terms of I've taken some shots at J.J. Abrams the last few weeks. This is building up. Like, this is a tease to where we're going toward the end of the year. But I look at Matt Reeves, who directed Cloverfield. He was in the J.J. Abrams sphere. I look at what he did with Planet of the Apes. I look at what he's done with Batman. Whenever this strike ends, I just have a feeling there is going to be a lot of turmoil at a lot of studios. I'm really hoping that there is some sort of accountability for Lucasfilm, and that the problems can get fixed. For my money, Matt Reeves should be on the top of their list for potential Star Wars directors. I think he is the person that I would want to potentially try to fix this, because I think he is a very good visual stylist. He is very much into playing in the sandbox of franchises. He is good with sci-fi. He is good with fantasy. He is good with telling stories. Matt Reeves should be a director for Star Wars if he wants. If he wants nothing to do with this franchise and he just wants to play in the Batman sandbox, all the power to him. But I really hope that there is a world in which Matt Reeves can get an opportunity to direct Star Wars, because quite honestly, he is one of the few people that I would have any hope for at this point.
I see what you did there. But I gotta say no, because I think he's just stronger doing these more grounded stories. And if you give him Star Wars, you're gonna have to tell him to like do these elevated things with the Jedi and the Sith and all these.
Do you though?
ideas.
Do you really have to do that?
I mean, that's what people want. That's what the majority audience wants. So if you do a movie, you have to give what the majority audience wants. It's not going to be like an Andor movie.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying you have to do what Andor's doing, but I just don't know that Star Wars has to be.
Because I feel like the strength is like these characters where you can kind of dive into these characters and you get to know them, like Caesar, Penguin, Catwoman. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he's going to get the time to do that.
I would argue that this is something that Star Wars desperately needs. They need somebody to actually develop characters. I think that is a huge
shows now. So that's what I'm thinking. Like in the movies, I don't know.
But I don't even think they're doing a great job with a lot of the shows. Like, I think Obi-Wan was bad. I don't think Ahsoka is very good. I think Andor is genuinely the best thing that Disney has done with Star Wars, and I think it's an exception to the rule. As opposed, and we will have a long Star Wars.
Oh yeah, we'll have the main event discussion.
Main event. But my money.
And it's not a Saturday night's main event; it's the main event, which is bigger than Saturday night's main event. If you know what I mean.
It's Brawl Out all over again. Brian, is this the best superhero movie of the 2020s? I'm gonna say yes, and I know we are going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I think this movie is better. We will come back to this conversation when we talk about Guardians 3. I think this is the best superhero movie of the 2020s.
It's a tie for me right now with that and Spider-Man, No Way Home, just because I feel like that has the best, like, that the moments where you're just smiling ear to ear. But this case, the Batman has the better script by far. So it's kind of like give or take. So depending on what you want out of your superhero movies, you want your darker, better stories, then this is probably the best one. You want those nostalgic moments that make you pop and make you feel young again and give you happy moments that have payoffs at the end. Then you watch Spider-Man, and that's probably your favorite. So it's a tie for me for those two.
Into the Spider-Verse. I will also ask that question again. And right now I have the Batman as number 1, but I'm going to rewatch Into the Spider-Verse, and I will reserve the right to change my mind. Brian, question 5. In one word or less, will Robert Pattinson as Batman ever appear with another DC superhero?
Okay, before I answer, can we clarify this does not include Robin?
No, one word.
Yes, then I'm going to say Robin. Sorry.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
I will say yes because of the Robin caveat. Bonus question. Will Robert Pattinson as Batman ever appear with another member of the original Justice League?
No. There you go.
No. That is the spirit of the question, but you found a loophole. I can't argue with that. But yes, Robin is going to be in the movies, I think. But he's not ever going to interact with whoever they cast as Superman or Lantern or Flash or any of those people.
I'll even go further. I don't want any supernatural shit. Like, you heard my thoughts on
No,
Dark
I
Side
don't
of
either.
that shit.
I don't either.
Solomon Grundy, no. Killer Croc, no. Scarecrow, yes. Who are the other weird
Yeah,
ones?
you got Two-Face is kind of a weird one.
That works.
I think you could do Two-Face. I mean, if Nolan can do Two-Face, put it this way: any villain that could appear in a Nolan version, I think can also appear.
And then the problem is you got Poison Ivy. That's always going to be. That's always going to be the borderline. But we can. But the next, maybe, I don't know.
All right, Brian. Next week we are going to do something very different. We are going to also be discussing Batman, but we are going to do it through the lens of the Harley Quinn animated series. We are not putting an entire season is not in contention, but instead we will be looking at a very specific episode. I am not going to say what this episode is about, but I am just going to tease that it is season 3, episode 8, and we are going to get to explore facets of the character. The name of the episode is Batman Begins Forever, so that is a little bit of a tease. Brian, as of this recording, has not watched any of Harley Quinn season 3, but he is going to in preparation for next week when we discuss season 3, episode 8 of Harley Quinn, Batman Begins Forever.
I can't wait because when I was watching season 1 and 2, I was just getting stoned in my backyard, watching that shit back to back to back. That's one of those perfect shows you can watch getting stoned, people. I know that sounds like a weird kind of comment, but trust me, Harley Quinn fits that bill so much. It feels like when I was watching Rick and Morty the first 2 seasons when it wasn't so crazy, and you can just kind of enjoy it, get stoned, and just have one of those laughing shows, kind of giggling the whole time. That's the vibe that I get from the Harley Quinn show, and I can't wait for season 3. And I specifically waited for season 3 to wait like this because Jerome's been kind of pushing and teasing we should do an episode about it. And I figured, well, if we do it, let me just binge it right before and then wait, because season 4 is out right now already, right? Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, season 4 is nearly over. I don't think it's nearly been as good, and that will be part of our conversation next week as well.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. I'm ready.
All right, so next week we will be discussing Harley Quinn. For Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.
So the Gotham Renewal Fund, that's just like the Trump organization, right?